Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views covering the topics we hope are relevant to you. Today, politics in the Punjab gets even dirtier as a Congress advisor is arrested for criticising the government. But if you think you're safe in the US, aggressive Hindutva forces are also on the march there in several guises. Firstly, with efforts to stifle criticism, even in the land of the free. And secondly, its insidiously successful attempts to divide the Sikh community by using, wait for it, tables and chairs of all things. All will be revealed shortly. And finally, we've talked a lot about how and why Sikhs should be more active in the film and media industry to get their message out. Well, one man has, and to great success. More on that in a moment. Well, joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to all of our amazing viewers out there. Thanks for all of your amazing comments. Keep them coming because we love reading them.
Indeed we do, and together James and I will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And as James mentioned, we will of course at the end of the show take a look at some of your great comments and have a chat about those. So let's move on with the show. James, what are you going to start us off with today?
Well, let's start off, Angus, with some pretty cool news, and this is in relation to a Sikh superhero, something we definitely need to take a look at because this animated short film is actually picking up awards all over. It premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival and has won awards and accolades around the world, so it's been pretty amazing. So let's take a look here. First at a clip from it, and then we'll take a look at the actual, we'll talk about the creator as well as the amazing response that he's had from that project.
I was 12 years old. The Prime Minister was assassinated by two of her own bodyguards. The men wore turbans, just like me. My family and I practice a religion called Sikhism. In our faith, all men and even some women wear a turban. It symbolizes our belief that all people are created equal. But after that assassination, our turbans made us targets. Angry mobs hunted and murdered thousands of Sikhs. No part of me felt Indian anymore.
All right, so as you can see, it is a pretty cool little animated short with some real footage as well from when the creator arrived in America, when he went back to India, and then again returned when he was 18 years old. So it's quite the tale, but the whole goal of the short film is to, once again, like our show, it is to educate and reduce prejudice against the Sikh community. So it is really cool because not only is this film getting awards, but it's also getting media coverage everywhere. As you can see, Good Morning America actually featured it on the show during the Tribeca Film Festival week. Variety, Forbes, I mean, some big names are actually giving recognition to this wonderful little film. The creator has also spoken and created a bit of a circuit for being a keynote speaker and addressing different groups, including NASA, Apple, Google, and working with the city of New York and other NGOs as well around the US to create more dialogue and understanding of the Sikh community. So it has been just amazing. Now, Mr. Vishad, sorry, I pronounced that incorrectly, I'm sure, but he is a New York-based illustrator, and he teamed up with some other illustrators from around the world to create this short film. And his whole goal was to create something that was educational, informative, but also looked at the history. He arrived in back in the US just after 9/11 or just before, but he really felt the impact with the racism that was directed towards him after those attacks. He really had to find a way to fit in the US, and he struggled with his own personal identity, being Sikh and then cutting his hair and really trying to fit in the US after such horrific events and so much racism towards him. And then found his calling when he takes on this persona as the Sikh Captain America. So it's a really neat little film that I really enjoyed, and I thought was really just an amazingly done way to reach a new audience. And we've talked on this show many a times about the need for more lead or strong characters in Western media when it comes to the Sikh community. We usually see them working at 7-Elevens or other acts and other positions or roles in films and television where it's more of a comedic role. And I think that the importance that we need to see is Sikhs in strong leading positions or strong supporting positions, more so in Western media, to really take it above and beyond, to open that door to dialogue, to open that door to acceptance, and to help break down the barriers of racism all around the world, but especially in the Western world. So that is where, my thoughts are on the industry as an actor, as a writer, and, as a staunch supporter of the Sikh community. That's something that I'm passionate about, is seeing more people getting involved. And there's so many positions out there for young Sikhs or even older Sikhs to get involved in the film industry, whether it's working as a background actor. There's so much demand right now that it really is a great opportunity and a great time to explore the options that are available to you if that's of interest. Now, this film was really well done, but I don't want to give too much away because I have actually reached out to the creators and they have agreed to come on the show and have a quick discussion about the film, and we'll be doing that within the next week. So stay tuned to the next episodes because we will be having them on the show and having some great information and just talk to them about the personal connection to this film and the story that goes with it. Angus, I just was really excited to see this happening and to see more of a feature for the Sikhs in that area. And I just think that's a great way to reach out. Now, the creators have also attached lesson plans so schools can actually utilize this along with the lesson plans to incorporate into the classroom to create more dialogue and more understanding as well, and use it as a learning tool. So just the whole complexity of it goes far and beyond just a simple film. It definitely has much wider impact. As I said, the accolades and awards that it's been winning really shows how well it's done.
Yeah, fantastic. It's great to see this. We do know how powerful TV, film, media of this sort can be, particular animation for the younger viewers as well. They have a huge impact, a hugely influential impact, which is, of course, why they're so widely used for propaganda purposes, because they work. They get a message, they get every message that the director wants across to the audience. It influences the audience. So what better way than for the community to produce material like this, which is extraordinarily educational but extremely influential. People watch it, they start to understand, they get this message, they understand what it's all about, and they start to empathise, and that's all about breaking down the barriers. It actually reminds me, there was a film here in the UK a number of years ago called East is East, which again was an extraordinarily powerful film. It was a humorous film, it was a feature-length film about the Muslim population in a city in the north of England, Bradford. And it was a white woman who'd married a Pakistani man, a very traditional Pakistani man, and a Muslim, and they had 3 or 4 children. And the story was basically how the 3 or 4 children were trying to marry the difficulty of Western culture with very traditional Islamic culture from Pakistan, and the father's particular unhappiness of how the children were being seduced away from the very traditional cultural heritage that he wanted them to be brought up with. But as as a white man watching this, it was deeply educational about the struggles that these families have in both generations. The younger generation, who were trying to retain at least some of their cultural background, but still actually enjoying the Western culture, and likewise the struggles of the father, trying to say, look, you mustn't lose this cultural heritage that really belongs to you. And it was deeply impactful, certainly on me, and it was deeply impactful on a huge amount of British people who watched it, British white people, who then began to understand and empathise with the struggles of that community. And most of it was done through humour. It was deeply powerful. And again, here I think there is a huge opportunity for the Sikh community to follow that same example as they are doing now, clearly here. Using humorous, whether it's animation or film or even TV programmes, whatever it happens to be, any media that certainly comes with humour, goes a huge way to breaking down barriers and getting a message across. Again, we talk regularly, James, about education. Well, it's education through a bit more subtle means. It's a film that gets a big message across, and the audience then start to understand, that's what it's all about. That's why the Sikh community are always talking about 1984, or that's why, they've been complaining about India. Well, we thought India was okay, but, well, clearly it's not. It's getting the message across, even in a subtle manner or even subliminal manner, but that message gets across and the audience then gets educated. So yeah, it's great to see this, James. Fascinated to hear what the filmmakers themselves have got to say about it, but I think this is a very, very positive step forward.
Absolutely. And just the raw emotion of the personal story, I think, really captivates as well and brings it to that next level of being able to relate to the film. So it's just very well done. Definitely it deserved all the awards and accolades that it's received, and we'll look forward to having them on the show very soon. So let's move on, though, to the India government once again at their old tricks, Angus, as we've talked about over and over again, but this time they've gone after someone different. This time they have arrested Malvinder Singh Mali, and he is a journalist. He is a critic of the government. And this time, when he spoke out by posting another story on his website, they came knocking on his door and took him into custody for defamatory comments against the Punjab government, Chief Minister Man. And this, again, is just another example of the abuses of the legal system to really go after anybody who criticizes the government. And at this point, of course, we also have seen Mr. Gandhi speaking out, and he is saying that it is a flimsy charge. It is basically just a BS made up pile of crap that they are going after someone once again, and that he should be released immediately without delay. And again, they're claiming that it's an IT Act case, but it's just as simple as the fact that he spoke out. He is a government critic. He is a well-known journalist, and he has worked as an advisor to the Congress leader, Navjot Singh Sidhu, in the past. So once again, it's just a sign. Now, it was his brother who confirmed through the platform X, formerly Twitter, of the arrest. And as you can see here in the story, that, as I said, Mr. Gandhi has condemned the arrest, and the MP warned the state government against taking such undemocratic and coercive steps, and instead focus on the deteriorating law and order situation in the state. So again, that's something that we've spoken about to great lengths, Angus, is the lack of law and order, the lack of involvement in the government where they need to be focused to support their citizens, to support their future, and of course to be the democratic power that they want to become as leaders in the world. I mean, they have the amazing opportunity, and they're at a crossroads where they can take one path to being a great leader in the world and contributing so greatly to history and the future of the world, or they can continue the path they're on. And to me, it's a self-destructive path, because they're going to see the breaking up of India into a bunch of smaller countries where there's going to be independence declared and demanded. by states such as the Punjab, among others. And if they don't start making corrective action, they're also at risk of future pressure, because I don't think that citizens around the globe, once they are more aware of the human rights abuses, the abuse of power, and the lack of proper use of rule of law in India, will continue to stay silent when it comes to major trade agreements and other bilateral agreements that are in support of India. I think that when people are more aware of these abuses, they are going to demand their politicians start to pull back on the trade agreements and the trade negotiations until such time as India is able to put in place protections for their own citizens. And you're seeing that there in the UK as well, Angus, where there is a lot of pressure on the Indian nationals, both there in the UK, in the US, in Canada, when they are speaking out. And then, of course, the India government turns around and puts terrorism-related charges and lays the first information reports against these individuals. And we're seeing it over and over, and it's just a complete abuse of power, but it's not taking them anywhere forward in the international community. It's setting them back in terms of democracy.
Yeah, there is actually an interesting, you mentioned about here in the UK, there is an interesting parallel going on here in the UK, which I'll come on to in a moment. But I think with this specific case, I think to remain balanced about this, let's try and keep balance about it. Defamation laws exist for a very good reason. They are there to stop anybody just going on to into a public domain like social media and making false accusations or false claims that cannot be supported by evidence. It's there to protect everybody. You can't just go out there and label anybody anything that you want, because in simple terms that's defamation. So those laws exist for a very good reason. However, that law can only be enacted if somebody can only be found guilty if there is supporting evidence to say that yes, what they said was evidently false. Now, this is where things start to go wrong. That's fine in an ideological society, and usually in a Western democracy, these laws work extremely well. The laws of defamation. It does prevent people from going onto social media and making wild, baseless accusations and labelling people wrongly and unfairly. But it crosses a line when those laws are used and abused to essentially suppress political dissent or political criticism. And this clearly is happening in India. Now, we regularly report on the fact that India does not have a free press. We regularly have reported on Kashmir as a prime example, where several media outlets, news outlets, have been closed down by the Narendra Modi government because they dared stand up and criticise the actions of the Modi government. There was no defamation there. They were simply holding the government to account, saying you can't do this, and they had their media and their news outlets closed down. That is indisputable and unambiguous. But as it turned out, the IT Act was used in a lot of those cases as well. Yes, the very same act that this gentleman finds himself on the wrong side of. And it is very clear, at least on the face of it, that the criticisms that this gentleman were making against Simranjit Singh Mann, the Chief Minister, they were not baseless. They were simply justifiable criticisms of what's been going on. And yet he finds himself now under arrest under the IT Act for defamation. And it does appear, at least on the face of it, and a court of law will that will rule either way, and we'll find out what the result will be in due course. But the very fact that he's been arrested is in itself, and if he is innocent of this, it does imply that the act has been used and abused deliberately to harass and intimidate people into silence. Even if he's found not guilty in the future, the fact he's been arrested is enough to deter other people from standing up and criticising the government. So it's used as a mechanism to suppress dissent. It's used to silence people. Now, I referred to the UK. Yeah, actually, funnily enough, here in the UK, we've had a similar situation in recent times where people have been posting on social media, particularly during the riots that we had recently. Several people have been arrested for making statements on Facebook. And again, this is almost unheard of here in the UK, certainly in the past, but it's now increasingly common to see people having their doors knocked on by the local police for making statements on Facebook and Twitter, or X, including what are now classed as hate crimes. If you misgender somebody on social media, you do potentially face arrest. If you, because that is seen as what's now called a hate crime. People during the riots made various comments on Facebook and have been arrested for making those comments. Now, some of those did cross the line. They incited violence, technically speaking, and therefore they faced arrest. But we're entering a bit of a grey area here in the UK, and there's been a massive pushback from the public saying, no. We are a free country. We have freedom of speech here. We have the legal ability and right to criticise the government, even whether it's on social media, in public, standing up in a public square and saying it, whatever. But we have freedom of speech. But clearly the government here in the UK is pushing that boundary a little bit, but the public are pushing back. But that's what happens in a democracy. In India, to contrast though, clearly the BJP and the RSS have actually got free rein. They hold the levers of power, and they are using those levers of power ruthlessly, so that anybody who dares to stand up and hold the BJP to account, that dares criticise the BJP, if they just push it a little bit too much and start being a little bit too effective, those state mechanisms, those state levers are immediately pulled, and suddenly they find themselves locked up and arrested under spurious charges under the IT Act or the NSA, the UAPA, etc. So yeah, very worrying, James. This is, again, yet another sign that India, languishing at 159th, I think it is, in the Free Press Index in the world, only just above North Korea and Russia. Yeah, it can't be very proud of its supposed news media industry. Unfortunately, it is not a free press. It is not a free press in India. There is no freedom of speech in India, as we regularly report on.
Absolutely, and to show a quick contrast in the story that broke today is some protesters in Ottawa, and as Mr. Jagmeet Singh left the Parliament, some protesters were calling him corrupt and just all kinds of names and really egging him on. So instead of walking away, he actually walked right up, got face to face with the individual that was making all of these accusations and screaming at him and being aggressive. And let me tell you, as soon as Jagmeet got toe-to-toe with him, buddy shut up and changed his tune real quick. And, you know, it's not going to the courts. It was just he turned around and said, enough of this crap. And no, I'm not corrupt. And and I mean, Jagmeet's got some MMA training, so he is a guy that will stand his ground. But yeah, no, it was pretty funny to see this brave protester beacon off until Jagmeet turned around, got face to face with him, and he, you know, basically cowered like a little baby. So, but it just shows the difference.
Well, actually,
I mean, in India, that person probably would have just been taken away, arrested, and we wouldn't hear from him for years before it went to a trial, Angus.
Yeah, we had a left-wing politician here a few years ago, John Prescott. I'm certainly no fan of John Prescott, but he, a very traditional working-class Labour MP, quite a hulk of a man. And a few years ago, there was somebody in a public forum where was heckling Mr. Prescott, and I think shouted some abuse at him, and Mr. Prescott turned around and thumped him in the face. Now, I certainly don't endorse violence in any way, shape or form, but I think that gentleman who threw some abuse got a bit of a shock. And I have to say, actually, Mr. Prescott should have been arrested for that, but he wasn't, which does raise some questions. But yes, I think people shouting abuse at politicians need to be a little bit more circumspect, a little bit more restrained in how they do it, because they might get a bit of a shock.
Some people criticized him, but I said, hey, he stood up for himself like he's going to stand up for Canadians. So I was proud to see it.
Exactly.
So let's send it on back, Jen. Just what have you got for us today?
Right, let's get serious now. And my first story, it's a strange one, at least on the face of it, but it does actually point to things a little bit more serious. Tables and chairs, of all things. Well, why on earth could tables and chairs be so contentious? Maybe some people in our audience, particularly in Canada, may actually be aware of this. This might strike a chord. There's a very interesting, quite lengthy article released in Baz a couple of days ago, written by a gentleman, Harjot Singh. actually revealing an interesting history about tables and chairs in Gurdwaras and the whole concept of Langar. And the whole premise of the story, and I'll go through the story, I'll cherry pick little bits of it because it is very lengthy, but I'll summarise also essentially where it's coming from. But the whole concept of Langar has been poisoned and infiltrated by Hindutva. Yeah, they've managed to get their dangerous claws into this concept of Langar to try and divide the Sikh community, and it has worked to some degree, which is quite concerning. And Harjot Singh has identified this whole, I suppose, conspiracy coming from Hindutva to get to try and introduce cracks and breaks and fragments into the Sikh community in one of the most holiest and one of the most sacred basic concepts of Sikhi, that of Langar. Now, it was earlier this year, I myself was very kindly invited to a Gurdwara in Phoenix in Arizona. And I was invited to join the community in Langar, and it was a fabulously powerful concept that I was introduced to, and I saw it firsthand and enjoyed it firsthand. So I did learn all about it actually for myself and what it was about. And at that time, we sat on the floor to eat Langar. There were no tables and chairs in the hall where we all sat together, seated, cross-legged, to eat our food. Now, in this article, this gentleman refers to a Gurdwara in Canada, and he said the tables and chairs issue of the 1990s was engineered to poison Sikh institutions, fracture the community and bolster pro-India propaganda in Metro Vancouver and beyond. Well, why, might you think? Well, Harjot talks about when recently he was in a Gurdwara, and he'd brought some people like myself, white Christians, as guests into the Gurdwara. And one of those guests asked him, why are some of those people sitting on the ground? And he said, that was the question my Christian friend asked the three of us, all Sikhs, as we sat at tables in an interior British Columbia Gurdwara's Langar Hall. And his Sikh friend responded, well, some people are weird, they're just like that. But he said himself, I should have clarified that if I was to partake in Langar, I too would only eat on the ground. I should have blurted the short answer to my friend's question that furniture in Langar halls is antithetical to Sikh philosophy, and its continued presence is arguably one of the results of India's foreign interference. Wow, it's quite an interesting concept, this. So he goes on at great lengths talking about the origins of Langar, and it's worth repeating this just for anybody in our audience who isn't aware of the origins. But Langar traces back to the adolescent Guru Nanak's, the first Guru's Sacha Sauda, where the first Guru repurposed their father's business, seed capital, to feed starving people near modern-day Lahore. Guru Angad Dev Ji would then institutionalise Langar at all Sikh Gurdwaras, making it organised, permanent and accessible. So the concept was actually fabulous. It was essentially anybody could and would be fed in a Gurdwara if they were needy or hungry. So including the homeless, whoever, it doesn't matter their background, their ethnicity, everybody is welcome in a Langar hall if they are hungry and in need. So it's a very charitable institution. So though Langar is commonly translated to mean free kitchen, it is much more significant than free food. Langar is, first and foremost, a spiritual practice that can only begin with an ardas before the Guru. The distribution of Langar usually occurs by the Gurdwara entrance so that any person may eat without embarrassment. All those who are able to lower both their bodies and egos to the ground to partake in the Guru's Langar, so that not only is the Sangat equal in stature, but it is also in a state of spiritual humility. So there is this hugely spiritual and philosophical element to Langar. It's not just about being charitable. Right. It's all about sitting on the ground is symbolic that everybody is equal in the eyes of God, and certainly in the eyes of Sikhi. It doesn't matter what your background, who you are, everybody sits side by side on the ground. And at the time, the caste system, when of course Langar was first introduced, at the time of the first Guru, the caste system was very much in existence. And of course, Sikhi stands fundamentally opposed to the whole concept of the caste system. And again, Langar, just as a very basic concept, the fundamentals of Langar completely oppose everything that the caste system is. There is no hierarchy in Langar. Everybody's treated as equal. So by merging the principles of equality and humility, Langar exalted the downtrodden and humbled the extravagant by having them sit side by side and accept food from the same cauldron. In this way, Langar rebuked false, hypocritical social hierarchies. Again, this comes back to why the Hindus and the Hindutva and the RSS and of course the Brahmins are so opposed to the Sikh community, is because one of their fundamental concepts, Langar, just sits there completely against everything that the caste system is. Then the article goes on about the introduction of tables and chairs in Gurdwara halls was strictly a diasporic phenomenon, so it only occurred in the diaspora. And the first instance was recorded in 1908 in the inauguration of the first North American Gurdwara in Vancouver. And Sikhs reportedly included special arrangements to supply tables and chairs, forks and knives and other necessary material to host invited whites and non-Sikhs. So it was there as a courtesy to non-Sikhs to at least make them more comfortable as they joined the Sikhs in Langar. However, of course, it was supposed to be a temporary thing, and it ended up turning into a bit more of a permanent thing. And many newly constructed North American Gurdwaras followed suit and furnished their Langar halls accordingly. In the first half of the 20th century, the thinly populated but tight-knit Canadian Sikh community held each other strictly accountable, meaning Gurdwara management was primarily of interest only to observant Sikhs. Now, this is where the whole concept starts getting political and where Hindutva started interfering and using this whole concept to divide the community. And in the 1960s and 70s, visitors began regularly attending Gurdwara bareheaded and under the influence of alcohol. So immediately we've got this divide appearing between the strict, those who follow Sikhi more strictly and those who don't, those who are diverging slightly away from it. And Gurdwara management in Yuba City, for example, installed furniture in the Darbar Hall, a move that was eventually rejected. Still, furniture in Langar halls remained. So again, this divergence starts appearing between the strict and the slightly less strict followers of Sikhi. And this division then started being leveraged by Hindutva. They started encouraging this, again, by seducing through very subtle means, seducing particularly the younger ones away from very traditional. And interesting, this comes back to what we were talking about, James, earlier about that film East is East, this generational divide where it's very easy to seduce away the younger generation, tempt them away with the trappings of other cultures. And this was happening. Hindutva were fully aware of this, and they leveraged this whole idea. And the article goes into great detail. It's too long to talk about here in detail, but it explains how this happened over many years. And as a result, nearly 50 years ago, Canadian intelligence, even 50 years ago, Canadian intelligence identified that India regularly interfered with the Sikh community by influencing Gurdwara elections in order to secure friendly pro-India committees, funding media outlets, pressuring Canadian politicians and deploying local spies. So even all those decades ago, it was identified that yes, the Brahmins and the RSS, etc., and all their offshoots were interfering in Gurdwaras, interfering in the local politics and the management. They were ensuring that the management of Gurdwaras were inserted that they knew would then help create division amongst the communities. And even, of course, recently, James, as you reported, the National Security of Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarian Special Report on Foreign Interference, that whole investigation that was revealed just a month or two ago, they publicly confirmed much of what was discovered 50 years ago. It is still very much ongoing. Now, through the Canadian media, forces friendly to India declared that there were two types of Canadian Sikhs. There were moderates and fundamentalists. And here we come back to this divergence that's happening in the community. And it was encouraged and it was leveraged by Hindu forces. And they got the friendly pet Canadian media to start labelling these two sides. They were the moderates and, of course, they were the fundamentalists. And as soon as you start labelling people like that, immediately in the public perception, there is division. And this was a very clever, very effective way that India has managed to start dividing the community. So Pro-India actors would effectively use those labels to fracture Sikh leadership at Khalsa Diwan Society Vancouver, KDSV, and Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara, GNSG, the two largest public Gurdwara in British Columbia. The most prominent fault line that would be used to divide the community, believe it or not, the so-called tables and chairs issue. This is why we talk about tables and chairs. Something as insignificant as tables and chairs is actually deeply symptomatic. This is the outward sign of a much, much deeper and more dangerous thing that's been going on in Gurdwaras. So pro-India moderates, back to these terms, moderates and fundamentalists, the pro-India moderates also fueled legal disputes to fracture Sikh leadership. And then he goes on with various examples of how that's happened. And then after the Hukamnama is, as I understand it, is part of it's part of the process in the Gurdwara. I think when the Holy Scriptures, the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, is opened, and I think a Sikh approaches the Holy Scriptures, makes an ardas, essentially a prayer, and asks for some guidance from the Gurus. The Holy Scripture is opened. And as I understand it, what is on the left-hand page is the words that are written there are the guidance from the Guru to the person asking the question. So that is, as I understand it, the Hukamnama. Of course, our audience will correct me if I'm wrong on that. So after the Hukamnama, incumbent moderate executives and the Canadian media took every opportunity to broadly paint Sikhs as violent extremists and fundamentalists. Wow, where have we heard this before? For example, when a GNSG caretaker was murdered in 1998, GNSG's moderate president baselessly cast suspicions on fundamentalists, suspicions the media used to sensationalise Gurdwara conflicts. 5 white supremacists were eventually charged with that murder. So again, we've got evidence here where supposedly moderate Sikh leadership in the Gurdwara blamed another part of the Sikh community that they labelled as fundamentalists. So again, they've been used and manipulated by Hindutva forces into, again, increasing this division where one side of the community is blaming the other. It's an old tactic, divide and conquer. It's divide the community, set one side of the community against another. It's an old tactic. Now, for the next 10 years, moderate Sikh leadership and Canadian media worked together to weave a tale of Sikh extremism, linking disparate topics such as the Air India bombing, BC Gurdwara elections, Bhindranvali, Sikh activism in India and beyond. Yeah, we've all been there. We've reported on it, James. How often have we reported on this? The stories were often riddled with falsities and...
Constantly.
Yeah, here we go. So in this article just sums it up perfectly. The stories were often riddled with falsities and exaggerations, while any criticism was subjected to accusations of extremist sympathies. Label them a terrorist. Here we go again. All these fundamentalists are labelled as terrorists, as encouraged by India. So, as long as tables and chairs in Langar halls persist, India continues to effectively sow division with Canadian Sikhs. The tables and chairs, red herring, alienated at least 3 generations of Canadian Sikhs from the local Gurdwara. Why? Well, because of this silly infighting. Sikhs found it more peaceful to simply not engage with the Gurdwara at all, because every time they went to the Gurdwara, there were these arguments about silly things like even tables and chairs. Secondly, the Sikhs that did engage with compromised Gurdwaras were fed misinformation and propaganda. In particular, pro-India moderates distorted the discourse surrounding the Sikh struggle against Indian oppression in Punjab. The pain Canadian Sikhs felt regarding the ongoing genocides in India was redirected towards Sikh activism itself. Even now, many Canadian Sikhs unknowingly parrot debunked Indian talking points regarding Sikh activism, past and present, while a great deal more confess they feel only confusion and ignorance of the last 70 years of Sikh history. So he concludes, while India's assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar spotlighted their foreign interference, many Canadians, including Sikhs, failed to grasp the true toll extracted by pro-India actors and proxies over the past 50 years. The slow poisoning of Sikh institutions has largely gone unnoticed and unchallenged. As a result, multiple generations of Canadian Sikhs were raised in a fog of misinformation and distrust, as certain individuals compromised the core institution of Sikh philosophy, the Langar. Langar was designed to satiate a spiritual hunger and forge new social relations, but it's being diluted to something less. In order to reverse the erosion of Sikhi, we must embrace the humility and spirituality imbued in Langar. Well, absolutely perfectly put. Yeah, James, I think this article just perfectly summarises how dangerous and how effective Hindu forces, Hindutva forces particularly, have been in Canada and no doubt elsewhere. They've infiltrated the Gurdwara. They've managed to get their own sympathetic people in place and have very successfully divided the community. In, of all places, the most central and holiest of places, the local Gurdwara, where the community gets together. They've managed to successfully divide the community through even just the most innocuous means, tables and chairs of all things. But something as innocuous as that has managed to divide the community between the so-called moderates and the so-called fundamentalists. No, they're not moderates and fundamentalists. They're all Sikhs together. But Hindutva has managed to successfully get in there. They've got a crowbar into the crack in the community. They've leveraged that crowbar and they're breaking the communities wide open and wide apart. It's very insidious, isn't it, James?
Certainly is, Angus. And I remember those days in the 90s when the media was all over this issue because of the clashes that were going on. It was such a polarizing issue for the community, and also because it created a lot of pressure from the outside community. With the police and the media involvement, it just really got blown out of proportion. And I think that was the whole intent of the Hindutva and the Indian government, was to really cause that internal dissent there. And they were effective at that. These days, you very rarely ever hear about the moderates and the traditionalists and the fundamentalists. You talk about the Sikh community as a whole. So it's nice to see that as a general rule, it's all come back together, that there is that cohesiveness. I'm sure there are still pockets here and there that might disagree and, with each other on certain issues. But as a whole, I mean, I think that from my perspective anyway, I think that there's been a lot of healing in that community. But still, of course, with ongoing India involvement and interference, it's still going to take more time.
Yeah, it's a very interesting article by Harjot Singh there, and it does lay bare how effective the Hindu forces have been in just dividing the community. And once again, I'll repeat the old phrase, united we stand, divided we fall. And the community must always keep that in mind.
That's correct.
Okay, let's move on to my second story. And following really the same sort of theme and referring back to what we were talking earlier, James, how Hindutva forces and Hindu forces are very active across the West and particularly North America. Absolutely aggressively intent on ensuring that any criticism of the Modi government, of the RSS, of anything that's going on in India is immediately squashed, is buried, is suppressed, is threatened, is intimidated. Right. That anybody who dares stand up is intimidated into silence through whatever means necessary. Well, there's a very interesting report that was released just a couple of months ago called The Reporting Guide on Hindu Nationalism 2024. This report, and I'll do this on another occasion, we'll go into the contents of the report because it's actually fascinating. There's no surprises in there, really. I think we've reported on much of what is formally written down, but we will cover that report in another show. But the report itself was authored by several very well qualified, very senior academics, professors from various universities across America, Columbia, Georgetown, Santa Clara, University of Denver, Rutgers University, amongst many others. And of course, one of those authors of the report, Audrey Trusk, who's a professor of history at Rutgers University, has herself faced an absolute tsunami of legal hatred and legal activity against her by Hindu forces from India to try and shut her up. So, an article was written yesterday, just summarising actually what's been going on, just to highlight what's happened in the aftermath of this report. And again, I'll just quickly skim through this report, and it says, as we delve into the intricate web of the RSS, the HSS, which is the Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh, and the Hindu American Foundation, the HAF. Now, the HAF we'll talk about a lot, certainly in future, because this organisation has really shown itself for what it is, essentially a mouthpiece for the. In fact, not just a mouthpiece, I would say a cricket bat, to use a British and Indian expression, a cricket bat to beat anybody who dares criticise India. The HAF. We find ourselves at a crossroads where history, mythology and the present intertwine. Well, the so-called Georgetown Bridge Initiative has meticulously unravelled the connections, revealing both direct analogies and thematic parallels between Hindu texts and the actions of the Hindu American Foundation, the HAF. Now, all lots of big words, but basically it's saying the connections going on between the HAF and what's happening in North America, particularly in the case of Professor Audrey Tusk, the legal case. It's crucial to recognise that these actions bear resemblance to tactics employed by authoritarian regimes, including those observed in India. So they're drawing a parallel immediately between what's happening in India and the actions of the HAF in North America. In a democratic society built on the pillars of freedom, liberty, and the unshakable belief in the value of open discourse, the recent legal actions undertaken by the HAF against Professor Tusk stand as a stark departure from the principles that have shaped the US. The case against her, which spanned 19 months, raises troubling questions about the preservation of free speech, the suppression of dissenting voices, drawing disturbing parallels with authoritarian regimes, including those found in India. HAF's actions centred on the allegations of defamation. Here we go again, James, using the old defamation laws. Whether rightly or wrongly, it doesn't matter. But we'll see. All it matters is its intimidation into silence. So these laws of defamation have been used against Professor Tusk, stemming from her scholarly exploration of certain aspects of Hindu history and culture. Now, the HAF argued that her interpretations were offensive and harmful to the religious and cultural sentiments, a claim echoing the tactics of authoritarian regimes that seek to control the narrative and suppress dissenting voices through legal means. Aha, here we go again, James. Authoritarian governments around the world have a common playbook: suppress dissent, stifle critical voices, control the narrative. HAF's attempt to silence an academic through litigation mirrors these tactics, where legal actions are used as tools to intimidate and silence those who challenge prevailing beliefs or ideologies. Well, what an interesting parallel, James, to our very first story in the Punjab, where the activist, the advisor to Congress, has been arrested under the IT laws for the very same thing, the supposed laws of defamation.
That's right.
In the United States, freedom of speech is not just a constitutional right, it's a foundational principle that embodies the essence of democracy. In America, differences of opinion are not meant to be silenced through litigation. Learn this, India. This is how the Western democracy works. They are meant to be met with reasoned debate. You don't arrest them, you argue with them. That's what democracy means. The suppression of academic inquiry, as attempted by HAF, strikes at the heart of American higher education. The pursuit of knowledge, critical analysis and academic freedom are sacrosanct in our universities. Now, the parallels between HAF's actions and authoritarian practices are unmistakable, referring of course to India. The intimidation of scholars, the use of legal manoeuvres to silence dissent, the imposition of a singular world view on a diverse tapestry of thought echo the struggles faced by those who confront authoritarianism worldwide. Now, scholars, academics, intellectuals rallied to her side, as they well should, decrying the attempt to stifle academic inquiry and free expression. Their collective voices symbolise a commitment to justice, truth, and the unyielding belief that in America, and not just America but the Western democratic world, liberty and free expression will always triumph over attempts at ideological suppression. It turns out, unsurprisingly, here in the democratic free West, the courts rightfully dismissed HAF's lawsuit against Professor Tusk. The dismissal served as a powerful reminder that in America, justice and liberty must always prevail over attempts at ideological suppression. So HAF's actions in the case against Professor Tusk, which persisted for 19 months, carry echoes of authoritarian practices observed in India and elsewhere. Need we say more, James? I think this completely summarises everything that was said, everything that even came up in the story of the advisor to Congress in the Punjab. Same story, just in India, different outcomes.
Absolutely, and in a twist of the legal system, it was announced today that Mr. Poonen of Sikhs for Justice actually has filed a lawsuit against the government of India and Modi in the U.S., and it is to hold them account for foreign interference and the deaths of foreign nationals on foreign soil. So it's going to be very interesting. I'll have a report on that tomorrow night in more detail, but it just shows that now the other side is actually taking steps to really hold them accountable within the courts outside of India. So it's going to be an interesting process to see where that goes.
And I think it just highlights the contrast between India's democracy and Western democracy. Two completely different outcomes. Right. You can try your tactics over here in the West. They are just not going to work because we in the West live in democracies. In India, where actually there should be the same outcome, they don't work. Oh, sorry, those tactics work in India because you can get away with suppression of dissent. Right. You can get away with flouting ordinary rule of law because, well, you control the law, you control everything, but then you can't call yourself a democracy. So I would say very sobering evidence of what's going on in India compared to what's going on in North America, and more concerningly, the Hindutva activities, aggressive activities in North America. Fortunately, they are not working to the extent that they do in India. So, James, let us move on now to our comment section, as once again, we're running out of time. So, a final comment that appeared on my discussion with Dr. Grewal. And actually, this is a very interesting comment, a very philosophical, but absolutely correct comment from AP's Rosary. Why India fears Sikhs? Well, this person says India doesn't fear Sikhs. Sikhs fear India. That's why they've got to do their protests outside of India. Well, actually, this in many ways is very true. India doesn't fear Sikhs. Well, actually, we've discussed this at great length, James. On the face of it, India doesn't fear Sikhs. Actually, I think when we say India, the Brahmin leadership, the ruling elite of India, fear Sikhs. And I will always maintain that because they know full well that the Sikh community poses its deepest, most dangerous, most terrifying threat against their Brahmanical rule. That's why they're attacking the Sikhs and always have done, because they fear the Sikhs. So I would say that actually India, or the Brahmins, do fear the Sikhs. But what you very rightly point out, Sikhs fear India. Yeah, they do fear India, and rightly so, justifiably so, because every time a Sikh stands up and dares point out what's going on in India, the authoritarian rule of India, what happens to them? They end up like Amritpal Singh, in prison. Even an elected member of the Lok Sabha, yes, a member of their parliament who dared stand up against the government itself, finds himself in jail. That's why Sikhs fear India. That's why, as you rightly say, they've got to do their protests outside of India. Because in the free West, you can stand up and protest despite India hating that very fact and trying to label them all as terrorists. Yeah, but in the free West, we can stand up and criticise any government. And that's what we do on a regular basis. We do know that I regularly criticise our government on a regular basis because I can in a free democracy, James. We're allowed to do that. That's why fear has no place in any modern democracy, does it?
No, not at all. And again, it's, the ability that they say information is power. And if you cannot get the information to people outside of India, then you lose that power. So it's very important that the international community is made aware of what's going on within the borders of that country.
Yeah, and a very simple statement is if you fear your government, you are not living in a democracy. Fear of the government is a sign that is a government out of control, which means you're not in a democracy. So thank you for that comment. Right, I'll show you the other day. What do they have in common? Well, Gurdev Singh very cheekily and absolutely rightly points out Amritpal's got morals, the other two haven't. Well, I don't know about that. I'm not in any place to comment. I do know that Amritpal Singh does have a lot of morals, which is why he has become so popular and such a focal point for the community in the Punjab. As for Kejriwal and Rahul Gandhi, It's not my place to say whether, well, is it my place to say they've got morals or not? Maybe it is. I don't know enough about them specifically to make that judgment, but clearly good if you have. And thank you for that comment, James. That did make me chuckle, that one.
Yeah, that is funny.
Right, here we go. Kuljit Mangat, some tactics of Indian dictatorship, harassing and pressuring everyone who are the strength of agitators. Basically, I think this comment is basically saying the tactics of the Indian dictatorship are all about harassing, pressuring, intimidating. Yes, I think this perfectly sums up what we've actually been talking about for the last half an hour or so. This is how the Indian government does its work. It intimidates. This is how it retains power. This is how it shuts up its opposition. It intimidates them into silence. This is the act, as you rightly say, of a dictatorship. Couldn't put it better myself. And Jora Rai says, yeah, so sad to hear the second murder attempt on a respective previous President Trump. Yes, indeed. It's an appalling situation. And again, actually no place in a democracy. Unfortunately, it is extraordinarily rare in the West for any of our leaders or potential leaders to be attacked or to have assassination attempts. But it's happened twice now for President Trump, which we talked about at great length the other day, James, did we not? It has no place in Western society, this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's no secret that I'm not a big fan of Trump, but I am a big fan of peaceful protest, of making your voice heard at the ballot box and not through violence. So I'm just really glad that he is safe. I'm glad that the Secret Service, the FBI, and the local police department took such quick and appropriate action there. So congratulations and kudos to them for protecting Trump, because as I said, there's no place for violence in politics like that.
And this actually comes back, this loops back to the discussion about defamation and online censorship and things like this. We have, and we've had over many years, many very divisive politicians who have created huge amounts of hatred. Margaret Thatcher is one. From our country back in the 80s and the 90s, a very, very successful prime minister who was very divisive. And on the left, the amount of hatred that even now, actually today, that is generated. But if anybody on social media does make statements inciting violence, encouraging people to go out and attack politicians, as has happened, those people are rightly visited by the law, because, again, you cannot cross that line. By all means, criticise and be quite rude about politicians. That isn't against the law. But when you cross that line into violence or inciting violence, as obviously this is the extreme situation, you cannot do that. That does not belong in democracy. It doesn't matter how much you hate a politician, and heavens knows many of us hate many politicians and disagree with them fundamentally, but you cannot cross that line into inciting violence against them. Argue against them. That's the only way you have to tackle these people. So... And, wrapping up that comment, Khalistan Zindabad. Sorry, James.
Oh, I was just going to say that Elon Musk is now on the radar of the Secret Service as well for his comments about there not being any assassination attempts on Harris or Waltz. So, you've really got to watch what you say. And he put that up on X, very quickly removed it after people were just, shocked and amazed that he would put that up there. But again, the Secret Service and the FBI have confirmed that they are aware of it and that they have definitely taken notice. So you've got to watch what you put online. You don't want to incite violence, especially against political leadership.
Yeah, you've got to be very careful what you put online, and it has to be policed correctly, because yes, we must not lose freedom of speech, but ultimately there is that line and people need to be aware of where that line is. Don't cross it, because you will be rightly arrested, but up until that line, basically you can say what you want and you must be allowed freedom of expression up to, of course, that legal line. And so Jura Rai says, Khalistan Zindabad, please both of you be citizens of Khalistan. Well, if I have a Khalistan passport when Khalistan happens, I will hold it very proudly, James, as I'm sure you will too.
As I will, yes.
And I imagine it will be an extremely attractive looking passport with a Khalsa on the front of it. I look forward to seeing it. Right, Jagtar Sidhu. Very well said, my friends. Well, thank you and thank you. Fake democracy, fake justice system, fake administration. I think that is very politically put in a wonderful trio of statements. I don't think we could summarise that better. Fake democracy, fake justice system, fake administration, James. That sums it up nicely.
Well put, well put.
Hat B says, how can Modi keep getting away with it? Even the elections were rigged, using his men as the election commission. Well, I'm not aware of this, and I haven't actually heard of any election rigging from those last elections, so I don't know. I can't comment accordingly upon that, but if there is evidence out there, please, let us know. But I think what more importantly of your comment here is, how can Modi keep getting away with it? Yeah, well, he keeps getting away with it because he's a very powerful figure backed by very powerful people. Of course, the Brahmins, they control the judiciary. They control essentially Parliament now. They control law enforcement. They control all the state institutions. That's how he keeps getting away with it. Once you control all the state institutions, it goes back to many of my podcast guests have regularly paralleled what's going on in India to the 1930s situation in Germany. When the Nazi Party took control, they then one by one took control of all the state institutions, the judiciary, etc. And once they controlled institutions like that, they put their own judges in place, they put their own police chiefs in place, right across all these institutions, even in the civil service, they put their own people in place of the civil service. Once you've got control over all those institutions, it basically means whatever you want, you can make happen legally, at least on the face of it legally. That's unfortunately how Narendra Modi keeps getting away with it. It's very hard to fight against, and in many ways, I think it's easier to argue. Well, if you can't beat it, break away from it. And I think that is one of the reasons why Khalistan is justified more than ever. Because will you ever beat the Indian Parliament controlled by the Brahmins? No, you probably won't. The only people who can do that are probably Congress and the other parties. But the Sikh community, I don't think on its own will ever do that. The best option for the Sikh community is just wash your hands of it, break away from it. And that's where Khalistan comes in, James. If you can't beat them, is break away from them.
Yeah. Yeah, and very importantly, they control the media and the narrative there as well. So it's a tough spot.
Yeah, that's one omission I made, and well pointed out. Yeah, and likewise in the 1930s, Germany, the Nazi Party controlled the media. Of course, one of the most powerful institutions, right. And they've done that in India as well. So absolutely. Now, DXbone, thank God Sikhs have their own media. Well, they do, and it is an honour and a privilege for us to be part of that media, and we will continue what we can. Of course, we in the Free West have the ability to stand up and make to produce what we're doing. Unfortunately, do the Sikhs have their own media in India? James, they don't, do they?
Nope. Modi might want to make you think it's controlled by them, but definitely not.
Yeah, and why are we blocked in India? Ask yourself, if you're in India, because we do know we have some viewers in Punjab, welcome and hello to you guys again. In India, why do you think we're blocked? Ask yourself that question. Ask your average Hindu, why is Satellite TV, amongst many other channels, particularly Sikh channels, blocked? We know why, but Indian people don't, because they're fed a complete nonsense narrative from their own media. So anyway, firstly, yes, absolutely, thank God, Sikhs do have their own media. But what's important is that why are the other communities in India not allowed access to people like us? Because we've got the truth. They need to hear what we're telling. That's the scary part. It's all very well the Sikh community having their own media. Why don't Indians have a free media? I think that's even the bigger question.
Yeah.
And finally, to wrap things up,
Savage, you're so good looking, Modi was jealous. Here I find out it's something different.
Absolutely. And to wrap the show up, Suki Singh says, thank you guys. I really appreciate your efforts and hope God, Woe Guru, keeps you happy always. A wonderful statement, a wonderful comment. Thank you for your blessings. And thank you to, in fact, all our correspondents, all our audience who do make such similar comments. We receive on a daily basis many comments like this, which are very complimentary, but also very appreciative and very, very generous and very charitable. So thank you. We do read those and we do appreciate them. Even if we don't show them up in our comments section, we do absolutely read them, and they do have a very big positive impact on James and myself. So thank you very much indeed for those. Do keep them coming. But unfortunately, we must wrap things up as we have been beaten by time magnificently once again. But you have, of course, been watching Perspectives. Do keep those comments coming in as we do like to talk about, and they do create a fascinating end part of the show, and they give us lots to talk about. So keep them coming in. Don't forget, you can, of course, message us directly at message@satellitetv.com if you want to send us an email about things that you don't want to put in the public domain. And, of course, we do enjoy reading those emails as well, so keep those coming. But in the meantime, we'll wrap things up. It is a goodbye from me, and it's a goodbye from James.
Goodbye, everyone. And just a reminder, tomorrow we will have a report from the protests in front of the India consulate in Vancouver. So stay tuned for that tomorrow.
Indeed, we look forward to it. But in the meantime, you've been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.